When the CEO of a top automotive company decides to go undercover in one of his busiest garages, he never imagined the shocking discoveries that awaited him. What he uncovered not only challenged the integrity of his business, but also put the lives of his hardworking employees in jeopardy. The morning sun poured into the garage through high, grimy windows, casting long shadows over the worn-out concrete floor. The sound of clinking tools and the low hum of machinery filled the air, blending with the faint smell of gasoline and motor oil. Jordan, a 17-year-old mechanic, was already at work, her hands stained with grease as she moved from one repair to the next with practiced efficiency. Her hair was pulled back into a messy ponytail, and her eyes, sharp and focused, never wavered from the task at hand. The garage was her world, her sanctuary where she felt both needed and, for the most part, invisible. Jordan had been working here for almost 2 years. She had started out as an apprentice, wide-eyed and eager, watching the seasoned mechanics around her with a mixture of awe and excitement. Over time, she had learned to handle everything from oil changes to major engine repairs. Her confidence had grown with each task, and now she was known as one of the most reliable and skilled mechanics in the garage. Her colleagues often called on her for difficult jobs, and she had earned a reputation for solving problems that others couldn't. But despite her accomplishments, there were cracks beneath the surface that no one seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. The garage, while bustling with business, was severely lacking in the kind of maintenance that should have been standard for a company of its size. The tools were old, worn out, and in some cases, dangerously broken. Jordan had long ago accepted this as her reality. The wrenches she used had cracked handles, and the jacks, which should have been sturdy enough to support vehicles, often wobbled under the weight of the cars. The risk of working with such faulty equipment was ever present, but Jordan had no choice but to push through it. She couldn't afford to complain. She had a job to do, and she was determined to do it well, even if the conditions were far from ideal. The other mechanics were no better off. They were either too jaded or too afraid to speak up. Many of them had been working at the garage for years, but like Jordan, they had come to accept the dangerous working conditions as normal. Some of them would joke about the faulty tools, but there was no real sense of urgency to get them replaced. The garage was understaffed, and the focus was always on speed and profit, getting the cars in and out as quickly as possible, regardless of the risks involved. Jordan didn't mind the fast-paced environment. It kept her on her toes and gave her a sense of purpose. But deep down, she knew it wasn't right. She could feel the weight of every broken tool, every rusted screw, every malfunctioning machine, and it gnawed at her. But Jordan was resilient. She pushed through every day with a smile, even when she was silently frustrated. She didn't want to be the complainer, the one who rocked the boat. Instead, she buried her discomfort and kept working, because this was the job that would help her build her future. She had dreams beyond the garage, dreams of one day opening her own shop, where she could create the kind of environment that valued both the work and the workers. But for now, she had to make do. She had to prove herself in a world that didn't seem to care about her. What Jordan didn't know was that everything was about to change. The CEO of the company, a man who had always been detached from the day-to-day operations of the garage, had decided to go undercover. He was tired of hearing reports about the company's success from afar and wanted to see the real work being done at the ground level. He had seen the numbers, profits were up, the customer base was expanding, but he had never truly understood the realities of what it took to run the garage. So he made a decision he would go in and work alongside his employees for a day to get a first-hand account of what was really going on. Dressed in a simple mechanic's uniform and sporting a fake name, he walked into the garage early that morning. His heart pounded as he entered, unsure of how his presence would be received. The workers barely glanced at him, too busy with their tasks to notice the newcomer. Jordan, however, was too absorbed in her work to care about anyone else. She had her head down, using an old wrench to tighten a bolt. Her movements were quick and practiced, but the CEO could see the fatigue in her face. She was working with an intensity that suggested she had been at it for far longer than a typical workday should allow. The CEO's first impression of the garage was one of disorganization. Tools were scattered across workstations, and the floors were cluttered with metal parts and broken machinery. It was a far cry from the polished image of efficiency he had imagined. As he watched Jordan work, he noticed the worn-out tools she was using. One wrench, in particular, caught his eye. It was cracked along the handle, barely hanging together. Jordan applied more pressure to it, and the wrench slipped, causing her to hit her hand against the side of the engine. She winced in pain but quickly shrugged it off, returning to the task without missing a beat. The CEO was stunned. He had heard about the garage's need for better equipment, but seeing it firsthand was something else entirely. He watched as Jordan, with a stoic determination, worked through the pain, never pausing for a moment of rest. The tools she was using were clearly substandard, and yet she never complained. It was in that moment that he realized just how much his company had failed her. This wasn't just a matter of poor equipment, it was about the company's disregard for the well-being of its employees. He spent the next few hours observing the rest of the garage. The conditions were the same throughout. The employees, though skilled and hardworking, were performing tasks that, at any other well-funded garage, would have been done with much better equipment and support. The CEO felt a pang of guilt. He had been too focused on the financials, too detached from the people who made the company what it was. The realization hit him hard. He had been complicit in letting these conditions persist. As the day wore on, the CEO's frustration grew. He couldn't believe that a business of this size and reputation had allowed its workers to continue working under such unsafe and demeaning conditions. He had always taken pride in the company's success, but now he questioned if that success had come at the expense of his employees' safety and well-being. He could see the toll it was taking on Jordan and the others. They were all talented, driven individuals, but they were being held back by the very tools that should have been helping them excel. By the time the shift ended, the CEO had made up his mind. He would not let this continue. Changes would be made, and it would start with a complete overhaul of the garage's equipment. He would invest in the workers, give them the tools they deserved, and make sure that no employee would ever have to work in these conditions again. But the changes couldn't stop there. The garage's culture needed to change as well. There needed to be more respect for the workers who kept the company running. The CEO had learned a valuable lesson that day. Real success wasn't just about profits. It was about valuing the people who made that success possible. With newfound determination, he knew what had to be done next. He couldn't change everything in a day, but he could start the process of rebuilding trust with his employees, starting with Jordan. Want to see how this story unfolds? Stay tuned for more shocking truths behind the garage's hidden secrets. Follow us on Expect Stories for the latest updates.